Hey everybody, how's it going out there in YouTube land? Well, still not great weather. So I'm going to put out another video. What the heck? This video is actually going to be about fishing licenses and regulations. And a couple of years back, I did a Q&A on my blog, which unfortunately right now has been archived for a while because I'm going to be revamping it, so it's not available. But I thought I would take some of the questions on fishing licenses and regulations and share them with you, because we have a lot of new people who are coming into the sport, and like I say, I like to direct my videos to the new people who probably don't understand and more than likely are committing infractions to the regulations and maybe not realizing it. Okay, so I'm just going to take a look at the first one I've got here. Is actually from an individual calling herself Redneck Princess.
Oh,
You gotta love it.
yeah.
And she's asking, is it necessary for everyone to have a fishing license? Well, now, I can only speak definitively on the province of Ontario, but I do know that most places require people between the ages of 18 and 65 to hold a permit of some sort when recreational fishing. Now, there are some exemptions to that rule here in Ontario, and certain groups of people that are of native or indigenous status may be exempted. But for the most part, if you're between the ages of 18 and 65, you will be required to hold one of the two resident licenses in Ontario, and that is either a sport license or a conservation license. Okay? And I'll go into the difference between the two in a few minutes, all right? So our next question, so the answer is yes, you need a license, all right? So we have another question here from the Bass Slayer. And he's asking, okay, what authority do the conservation officers have, if any? Conservation authority officers actually have a lot of authority. Now, here in Ontario, their power comes from the Conservation Act of 1997. And there is a number of other acts that are under that act that they can enforce, and that's things to do with firearms, fishing game. It can also to do with your equipment, such as vehicles used for hunting, boats. It can also refer to buildings such as fishing huts, lodges, health and safety, and hunting and fishing. There's all kinds of things that they have authority with, and yes, their authority is very extensive. They can arrest, they can confiscate property such as your catch, your equipment, your boat, any other equipment that you may have that's used in gauge of the infraction. They can charge on the scene, like issue what's called a Part 1 here in Ontario. They can do a lot. So they can arrest, they can charge, and they can confiscate, and they have the legal authority to do that. Okay, so yes, they have a lot of authority. He's also asking that if you're from out of province, does that authority extend to people out of province? Yeah, if you come back into Ontario or come back in the country, you may find this to come back and haunt you. All right, so it's not going to go away. It'll always be there until it's dealt with, until you either stand trial or you pay the fines. All right. And talking about fines, I have another question here. Crappie Catching Chick wants to know what is the most you can be fined for or charged, as she's asked, for fishing without a license. The most that you can get right now under the Act is a $25,000 fine and 1 year in our wonderful provincial detention centers. Now, that is for repeat offenders. But the fine is certainly a lot more than what the license will cost you. All right? I know of a situation just 2 years ago. An individual was caught without a fishing license, didn't have a previous history, but he had a large number of illegally caught fish, and they got a $1,500 fine plus a 2-year ban for fishing in the province of Ontario. And if they're found fishing, at any time during that 2 years, trust me, the next time they go before the judge or the justice, it's going to be a lot more severe. So these people don't fool around. If you have committed a serious infraction, you are going to pay for it, okay? So just keep that in mind. It's cheaper to go and get the license. Okay, so what's our next question? Fishing with Henry wants to know if you have a license from another state or province or another country, is it valid to use in Ontario? No, it is not. You will be required to hold what's known as a visitor's license. Now, they're a bit more money than a resident license. They probably run about $150 a piece. If you're going to be here fishing and you're going to be here for a couple of weeks, yes, get one. Because the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry Enforcement do patrol. There is a possibility that you may be approached by one of them and asked for your credentials. If you haven't got it, you can be charged for failing to obtain a license. I'm going to put a link in the bottom of this video for the ministry. That will tell you all about the different types of licenses for visitor and resident, so that you can take a look at and maybe pass on to other people that are coming to Ontario and would like to fish. Now, going back to the must you have a license? A few years ago, the province stopped the temporary license, like the ones for a weekend or a day or a couple of weeks, and they introduced something what's called a free fishing weekend. So if you want to try fishing and don't really want to put out the money for a license, or you're only visiting for the weekend, if you're visiting on a long weekend here in Ontario, that's any weekend with a statutory holiday Monday, so from midnight Friday to midnight Monday, you can fish without a license in Ontario. And just remember, though, you are expected to have some understanding of the conservation license, because that's what they base it on. So even if you don't have the license, you're expected to fish within the parameters of the conservation license. So that's something you may want to look up. All right. Another question I have here: Bass Buddies. Are there any waters that you cannot fish in? Specifically asking, he said, can anyone, can you fish in any body of water? Well, yes and no. If the body of water you want to fish in is solely on private property, of course you will need the property owner's permission to go onto the water. All right. Now, if the property abuts, say, a river or a lake, the property line usually ends at the water's edge. So if you're coming in by boat or canoe or kayak, you can usually fish on the water because most water rights belong to the province. But you cannot trespass to get to that body of water. Now, some people think that their property extends into the water. It technically doesn't. There was a situation last year where an individual phoned the police and accused a guy of trespassing because he was in a kayak facing his dock a little ways out, and he was casting under the dock for bass. There is nothing wrong with that. He wasn't trespassing, but Buddy didn't like it. As long as you're not interfering with people that are swimming or interfering with someone's private property, there is nothing illegal about that, okay? So just keep that in mind if you are using a boat. You're allowed out in the water, but you can't interfere with somebody's property, all right? So if the body of water is completely on private property, no, you cannot fish there. You can fish in the water on the river or the lake as long as you're not interfering with private property. And also, don't forget, most lakes and rivers are the rights belong to the province or the state or whatever. They may designate places as non-fishing. So where it is non-fishing, of course, you wouldn't be able to fish there. And those will be listed in your regs. So that's why, again, you need to check your regs where you can and cannot fish. All right? Okay. So, quick recap. Yes, in most places you will be required to have a fishing license. All right? People between the ages of 18 and 65 will be required to have a fishing license or permit of some sort. All right? Also, it is your responsibility to have some understanding of the regs, to read them. There's no such thing in the eyes of the law of, I didn't know I couldn't do that. You're expected to be a reasonable adult, and that's what the courts will look at you as, is that you are a reasonable adult and you should know the difference between right or wrong. So here in Ontario, we have two different licenses. We have a conservation license and a sport license. And just quickly, the conservation license is one for someone who doesn't really harvest like myself. If you don't, you're just purely catch and release, but now and again may want to keep a fish or some fish, then the conservation license is probably the way for you to go. If you're an avid angler and you like to harvest, then I recommend you get a sport license here in Ontario, because not only does it double the quota that you're allowed to have, there's also a number of species of fisheries that are open and available to the sport angler that are not available to the conservation angler. Okay? So that is a quick recap of what the licensing system is about. So yes, you do have to have a license to fish here in Ontario. Even if you're just pleasure fishing and catch and release, you must get that license. And for $25 for a conservation license, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than having to pay a $1,000 fine for not having it. All right? So this is Sharon for Fishing Tales and Other Lies. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Don't forget, if you have any questions, put them down in the comments, and I'll put the link to the Ministry of Natural Resources of Ontario. All right? Until the next time, tight lines, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. All right? Bye-bye.